How has context been such a very key part of translating those segments?
I think context is super important on a couple of levels. There's the initial context of what's going on in the story, like what's actually happening in the narrative, and then there's the context of the meta-narrative, which stories like Roman versus Punk versus Rollins heavily rely on. So there are certain references that you have to know for yourself so you can tell that story on top of the story they're already telling as is. And then there's the context of language, like what do certain words mean in the context of what they're saying, how they're saying it, how it makes sense in the culture, and then how can you translate it and make it more accessible and relatable to somebody who only speaks Tagalog and doesn't speak English.
I think it's a different challenge when it comes to us Filipino commentators, because if you're a WWE fan, you're already used to hearing everything in English, right? Because that's how we grew up. So it is up to us to be creative enough that the Filipino viewers can relate to whatever we're saying and will choose to listen to us outside of the English commentary. We have to be on point and entertaining enough to be believable as our US counterparts, but also different enough that they will choose us.
Okay, it is now 10:11 p.m. Central Standard Time here in Texas. So there's a reason for that. And joining us for Mania Week, it's going to be a crazy weekend for you guys. So Stan C is a guest on the podcast, and he is the host, one of the hosts. Let's do one of the hosts with Ro, with Emil, with Chito, and we'll throw in BB producer Jazz with the Wrestling podcast. And we have a new person. Carlo Pamintuan is the second half of the WWE commentary team there in the Philippines. And I will ask this: who is Joe Tess and who is Wade Bear in your eyes?
Yeah, Carlos, the Joe Tess of the pair, for sure.
Okay, what makes you Wade?
No, I think I just fell into the situation first because me and Stan both do play-by-play commentary here locally for different sports, mostly basketball. But
right.
In terms of how we landed the WWE gig, they talked to me first, so I was the first to actually try out. So I guess because of that order, I just fell into what was already comfortable to me, right? So doing the play-by-play. So when Stan came in, he had to adjust and turn more of a color commentator to complement what I was already doing, because I basically claimed the spot for myself, getting there ahead. So it was not a decision that was deliberately made. It's just the order of things that allowed it to happen.
It also helped that I've had experience working with the local indie wrestling scene here in Manila. So, that gave me the unique perspective of working with talent, being in the locker room, being backstage, having been part of a couple of matches, either as an honorary participant or as a ringside manager. It does give you some perspective that you wouldn't otherwise have if you were strictly doing play-by-play. So I guess, as Carlos said, things just naturally fell into place for us.
And I'm sure, even though you don't have the highlights for on being in the indie scene, how much are you exposed in professional wrestling? Was that something that you grew up with, Carlo, growing up, or was it something that you've used in your time as a commentator with the basketball teams in the Philippines?
Oh, for sure. I grew up as a fan of the industry. I think it started with, and I've told Stan this, it started because my grandmother was watching wrestling. But before that, it was actually my granddad who was a fan first. When I was staying in their house in here in Pampanga, he had photos of wrestling shows that he went to, and it was 100% Japanese wrestlers. I don't think during those times, maybe early 80s, he watched a couple of wrestling shows in Manila, and he had photos developed. So those were my first the first wrestling experience that I got. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away very young, very early. So it was my Lola who was my figure growing up in terms of being a wrestling fan. So yes, I've had this lifelong relationship with wrestling that ultimately I think helped me land this gig.
How much for you guys? Since it's Mania week, and we'll delve into like the logistics of commentating from basically another side of the planet. What was your WrestleMania moment for both of you guys?
Like a favorite WrestleMania moment on the call?
Let's do as a fan first, and then we'll delve into, because we are going to talk about what your calls are with your WrestleMania moments. But as fans, before even being behind the mic, what is that WrestleMania moment for you guys as fans?
Okay, I have something off the top of my head.
Okay.
Mania 35, which Carla and I were coincidentally at in person at MetLife Stadium. John Cena made a surprise appearance during the Elias promo, and I just lost it. Like, I was there with a friend of mine who I was managing in the wrestling scene here in the Philippines. We just lost our minds. We videoed ourselves rapping along to Basic Thugonomics. And much later, when the lockdown happened, WWE Southeast Asia was promoting the first ever pandemic WrestleMania, and they were like, "We're gonna give away prizes if you can send us like a WrestleMania moment that you loved." Right? So I sent them that video of me rapping along to Basic Thugonomics from MetLife, and I got a The Rock T-shirt out of it. So this was before I got hired by WWE, and that moment just immediately stands out.
Oh, for sure. As a fan, that was my favorite moment as well. Because, growing up, you always knew that for you to become like this full-fledged WWE fan, you'd have to watch a WrestleMania at some point, right? You'll have to make it happen at some point. And for me, it was the same as Stan's. It was back in 2019, because for me it was it was a financially driven decision. Because if I watch in New York, New Jersey, I could stay with a cousin. So for me, I was like, okay, this is the WrestleMania that I was going to, and then I saw him in line. I think was it for the shop where
Yeah,
we
probably.
saw each other first. But we weren't even like friends back then. We just knew of each other. We circled each other around the industry, so it was fun to see someone there. He had much better seats. I had the giveaway seats, like 3 rows. Before the very top of the MetLife Stadium, but still, I had like the best time as a WWE fan.
6 years ago, WrestleMania seats, the ones that I got, they were pretty near to the ring. It cost like $400 with fees. Now you'd be incredibly lucky if you could sniff tickets for $500. Like $1,000 is like the best price you can pay these days. So I'm just glad we're employed at this point.
No, because like that's the thing with ticket services here in the U.S. and it's this whole kerfuffle with the ticketing services that really drive up the prices to the point where the U.S. government's like, hey, let's do something about it. It hasn't moved, but it's been heard.
Yeah. Looking back, I'm just really thankful that both Carla and I got to have that experience of being at a WrestleMania live, and neither of us knew it at the time. Obviously, nobody knew that would be the last pre-pandemic WrestleMania. But to have that experience and to take that with us, and we happen to be the two guys that ended up getting this job with WWE, and every time WrestleMania season comes around, we always get to draw back on that experience. And it just seems like kismet, like fate, right? That we happen to be those two guys can draw on that specific experience at the same time and bring it into the same job.
Because I was thinking about that too. Like, if 2020 never happened, would you have gone to that year's WrestleMania?
No.
Okay. Dang it. Okay. We tried there too. So, switching over. So, what is your favorite Mania moment as broadcasters?
I would have to pick the return of Cody. I think that was a very special moment to me because, like, everyone kind of knew it was going to happen right before that stage, but then you weren't completely sure. You were like 10% of you was preparing itself to be underwhelmed with whoever it could have been outside of Cody. But when the music hit, I was complete euphoria.
Yeah. For me, it's a toss-up between Ray versus Dom from WrestleMania 39 and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos from the same Mania.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Ray and Dom, that's one of my favorite matches I've called with Carlo because we just went back and forth. Like the banter was just so funny for the two of us because I was such a dirty Dom apologist, really calling out like the toxicity of parenthood and drawing on Filipino experiences. How here in the Philippines we draw so heavily on this concept called utang na loob or gratitude, right? And how as a parent, you kind of force your kid to do all these things out of gratitude, and I was trying to spin it in such a heel apologist way, and Carlo was really trying to play it straight and defending Rey Mysterio through everything Dom had put him through. So that was such a fun back and forth.
Wait, what
and
does
then,
that mean? Wait, defending? Oh, hold on, Carlo. You're gonna have to explain.
What?
Carlo was defending Rey and saying that Dom was the bad
Love to
kid.
hear your side of that story, and then what's like insane? What was the reaction
as a kid? There's nothing that should stop Ray from hitting Dominic Mysterio legally in a match.
Mhm.
No, I mean, but even from the entrance, I mean that match was just so well done because it got so much heat on Dom. Like it's difficult to imagine the trajectory was even remotely possible for Dom when we first started seeing him wrestle. Of course, we all saw him as a kid when they were fighting for his custody, but for him to be able to get here and to completely not need Rey Mysterio shine. Like, he doesn't need him anymore at this stage, right? He's his own man. Yes, they share a surname, but Dominic Mysterio can stand outside of the shadow of Rey Mysterio. And I think that match was a huge reason why.
Yeah.
Ah.
So yeah, that just is very special to me. KO and Sammy versus the Usos also extra special to me because I'm a huge fan of KO and Sammy, and to see the main event and get all emotional and the meta narrative that those two have been through, even dating back to their pre WWE careers all the way until this current point. That's why that match also stood out.
Wow, interesting. So we're gonna go time travel, and I'm curious which from the past, and if you had, let's say, WWE gave you access to say, hey, if you want to commentate a WrestleMania, what would that be?
A match?
The entire show. Like, let's say you're basically doing a whole WrestleMania for you guys. What would be that WrestleMania for you guys to commentate in Tagalog?
That's a difficult question, top to bottom, because you probably won't remember like 4 or 5 of the matches that will happen in one specific WrestleMania until you get to see it. But top of my head, I die to be in 18 with The Rock and Hollywood. I die to be a part of that, just that moment.
How about
You
you,
said
I would probably go for 20 because that was my first. That was my first WrestleMania.
Same.
Love Eddie Guerrero. He's my all-time favorite wrestler. That's my guy. I would have loved to do Eddie versus Angle. That triple threat. We all feel a certain way about Chris Benoit and everything, but there's just something special about your first WrestleMania as a fan. So I still memorize like more than half the match card for 20. It really is my favorite WrestleMania top to bottom.
And because I know you guys, of course, translating is probably the more the only aspect really to translate things in English, and having those vignettes. The one that stood out to me was both Grande Americano. That one was probably the more interesting thing to, because it's mixing, lucha libre culture and of course with the WWE. For your segments on your own, how much time did it take for you guys to really convey the story in whatever vignettes? Whenever there's a Raw or SmackDown, they needed a vignette for those segments.
I think it poses a certain challenge because as much as possible, we try to stay true to what the US writers are trying to say, right? But at the same time, there are also nuances that could not translate one-to-one with Filipino. So we have to get a little more creative in terms of telling the same story, but maybe in a different package. I think that's the challenge for it to still sound good, to still for example, when the US writers start rhyming, start using rhymes to convey a story, to build on the vignette that they're trying to do. We can't do that because if you translate straight up, it won't, right? It won't. So we'll have to look for a way to tell that story differently, to try and make it rhyme at least without having to use the exact same words that they also prepared for us.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger challenges is really trying to understand the meaning behind certain phrases, certain words, and really
True.
make it as accurate in terms of definition in Filipino, right? So like hip hop culture is really huge in NXT. So how do you say Miss Parker don't play? Right, you can't translate that directly into Tagalog because it'll sound ridiculous. So
Yeah.
I just say, I just say the Tagalog equivalent of Miss Parker don't mess around or Miss Parker's serious. Or sometimes I just say it straight up, Miss Parker don't play. Because the way we speak in Tagalog or in Taglish, sometimes you just say it straight up anyway, right?
Yeah.
Another good example is when the street profits say the street profits are up and we want the smoke. I would probably say it as, nandito ng street profits at handa na kami makapaglaban, which means the street profits want to fight.
Yep.
Which is basically what we want the smoke means. Right? Because, like Carlo said, there are certain things that if you just directly translate it, it's just not going to make sense.
It's context too, because I grew up and was born. I grew up here, but I was born in the Philippines to have that nuance of having both languages. But for someone who's kind of understood what English is, but they're trying to make sense of how they understand in Tagalog, how has context been such a very key part of translating those segments?
I think context is super important on a couple of levels. There's the initial context of what's going on in the story, like what's actually happening in the narrative, and then there's the context of the meta narrative, which stories like Roman versus Punk versus Rollins heavily rely on. So there are certain references that you have to know for yourself so you can tell that story on top of the story they're already telling as is. And then there's the context of language, like what do certain words mean in the context of what they're saying, how they're saying it, how it makes sense in the culture, and then how can you translate it and make it more accessible and relatable to somebody who only speaks Tagalog and doesn't speak English. So like those are the things I keep in mind. I think I also come from a perspective that's a bit different than Carlos in the sense that I also do dubbing and voice acting for certain TV shows and films that are on Netflix. And what I've learned from my directors in localization is what matters most for these streaming platforms when you localize for them is that you're able to accurately translate the meaning as opposed to accurately getting it word for word. Like there's a huge gap in trying to get that message across and telling that story when you're able to accurately get the meaning out of the words being said.
And for Carlo, when you're learning that, when you're translating these segments, like how does context apply to you when you do those segments on your side?
Well, I think it's a different challenge when it comes to us Filipino commentators because if you're a WWE fan, you're already used to hearing everything in English, right? Because that's how we grew up. Like that's the only thing available to us. It's not like, and this is not to demean anything. It's not like the other countries who may not be native or as natural English speakers as we are, where then their translation would be the one that is the one they're more used to. Like for example, our Chinese commentators or the Spanish commentators or even the Japanese for that matter, they may still be talking to a segment of where they are who are not that comfortable hearing everything in English. For us, it's not possible, right? If you're a WWE fan, you know English. That's just a given. That's just a natural fact. So it is up to us to be creative enough that the Filipino viewers can relate to whatever we're saying and will choose to listen to us outside of the English commentary. We have to be on point and entertaining enough to be believable as our US counterparts, but also different enough that they will choose us. So that I think is a really difficult challenge that we're facing, especially now in the Netflix era, because in the past not assigned to translate vignettes or not assigned to translate promos. We just call the match straight up. In between matches, we take a break. We just watch everything. Right now, that's no longer the case. We have to do everything from start to finish, and that has been, I'm sure Sam would agree, the biggest challenge so far in our transition to the Netflix era of the WWE.
Because now this year, it marks your first year of doing everything in
Yeah.
NXT, Raw, SmackDown, all the PLEs. When you had that call to take over and do all of these, what was it like hearing from the higher ups saying, "Hey, you can do this. We believe in you"?
That was nuts. So every fourth quarter of the calendar year, Carla and I always get really antsy because we're like, all right, what are they going to do with us next year? Are we still going to be employed next year? Right. Are we going to get renewed and all that stuff? Right. So I remember I was in Tokyo, like I just literally landed in Tokyo and we knew we had a call with our boss that night. Right. So I told my family, told my wife, I was like, all right, I'm going to be really anxious. If I need to hold your hand, please be there, all that shit. So I sat down, turned on my laptop, waited for Carlo to hop on, and then our boss basically told us, all right, guys, you're going to be part of the Netflix expansion. You're going to do everything. And I just felt a sense of relief because I knew that would mean a big pay bump, and that pay bump could help with a lot of things. I could also be able to say that wrestling is my full-time job and that I can make a full-time living off of what I do, which not everyone is blessed to say globally, let alone here in the Philippines.
But I'd be lying if me and San said that we did not wish for it to happen. Like months before, we were already saying that, hey, this might be an opportunity for us. What if they get us for Raw, right? We started with Raw because Raw was the one jumping to Netflix. We didn't know about the other parts first, but we kind of willed it into existence. We kept talking about it, kept discussing the possibility of it being everything, and then when it happened, I think I was working a 9-ball match during that time. I think when we did the call when you were in Japan, so it was a huge relief, and also it was with great excitement because it just meant that I can totally just dive into the entire WWE atmosphere and just soak it all in because we're in it for good. It's different when you just have to prepare for the PLEs because you will probably see the same 15 names in every PLE that you'll have to do throughout the year, right? Except WrestleMania, of course, because it's 2 days, but you did not really have to invest too much on the mid card on the when it was just PLEs. But now since it's everything, it's from NXT up until the main rosters, you have to be completely bought in. You have to be invested in each and every storyline that the WWE is trying to tell.
How much of your workload has changed too? Because I'm sure you mentioned you're just calling the matches and you watch the segments to now doing full blown. It's like the Filipino counterpart of what things are done in the trucks in the U.S. How much of that workload has changed for you guys, and how did you guys really handle the workload so that you can make things smoother as you guys started doing more stuff with WWE there in the Philippines?
I think it's changed a whole lot. I used to just watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and whatever else for fun. I would keep it in the background sometimes while trying to be familiar with all the stories heading into the PLEs. But now, you're actually in it. You're part of the shows. I can't watch Raw anymore while I'm doing the dishes or taking care of the dogs and whatever. That's no longer an option. I have to be here in my booth doing these shows with Carlo. So that's huge. There's also a bit more effort now into trying to really know everyone outside of WWE just in case they find their way onto the shows we're calling. For example, I make it a point to watch Evolve just because I love wrestling and I love Evolve.
Yeah.
I love seeing these new stars be on the come up. And it came in handy when Swipe Right suddenly appeared on NXT, and now they've appeared a couple of times, and I'm the one explaining context on who these guys are, what the college frat boy gimmick is all about, that type of stuff. So it really has changed massively, for me at least.
For me, I think the translations really take up a huge chunk of the time in terms of our preparations. Again, these are things that we did not have to do before. We just had to call the match. So you can't really prepare what you're going to say throughout a match, right? So there's not a lot of pre-work that you can do outside of just knowing what the storyline is and what it's more a feel of what they're trying to say. That's where the value of us being fans from years back come in. But now there's a lot more pre-work. Like when the first draft comes in, me or Stan will start listing the division of who takes who. Usually I take the translation for the faces and he will take the translation for the heels. But sometimes when the workload swings too heavy for the faces, he'll get a heel. We do our adjustments. But I think it's the pre-work that has changed drastically because we have to put in more hours before the shows because and you know this, the ever changing story that is being told. It could be one thing a few minutes before, it could be different. So you'd have to be on the ball. You have to be aware and ready to make the necessary changes, whatever is needed.
And I'm sure there's so many things that get tripped up so many times. What are some of the common pratfalls when you guys do commentary? What are some common things that you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again?
Ricky Saints.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was about to shout the exact same name.
Yeah, that's our favorite right now. So Ricky Saints comes in, right? And at first, Vic and Booker and Corey Graves didn't even mention his name. And now we know that was premeditated, that was deliberate. On our end, we were just so excited. I was like, it's Ricky Starks! So.
And then even after they announced that his name was Ricky Saints, I accidentally called him Ricky Starks once, and Stan also did it once. So we were hoping that would be the last time we ever make that mistake. But
don't worry, no, it took me a while because
in the heat of the moment, it could happen.
Yeah, it took me a while too because like when he moved over to NXT, my brain is still wired to Ricky Starks. It just changed for a bit when Vic, Book, and Corey were saying Ricky Saints. All right, it's there, but initially it's been Ricky Stark because he's a huge guy here in Texas. So like a lot of us in the wrestling scene, we're still trying to get used to it. We're like, it's Ricky Star. Oh, okay, it's Ricky Saints. So like it happens every time. And probably the more interesting thing too is having this full lineup that you have now. What are you guys looking forward to now that you're basically in the picture of where WWE is?
You know, weirdly, I'm really looking forward to the Saturday night's main event because those are the only shows that we don't have to do and we can still get to enjoy as fans. So weirdly, those are the things that I check in the calendar. It's like, okay, I'll just chill out for this one. I'll just enjoy the show. I'll just sit back and be a fan and just remember what it was like, right? Because, you know, it's been what, four months of us doing this nonstop. And it's been challenging. I mean, especially when the WWE went over to Europe, and you'd know that would be an ungodly hour for us. It was a slight change for US from prime time to afternoons, but for us, it was from our mornings to like 3 or 4 a.m. start times.
Wow!
So that was really challenging because we're coming off of our jobs as well. I mean, it's not like we're not doing anything here in the Philippines locally. I still do PBA games. Stan still hosts a ton of events of weddings and whatnot, and those will end late. Like I sometimes would get home at 12 midnight and have to prepare for a 3 a.m. show, and that's just how it is, right? So I'm really hoping for those few moments like the Hall of Fame and just a little bit just to watch as a fan. No need for me to prepare. Just enjoy whatever the WWE is presenting.
For me, something a little bit more immediate, and that is my upcoming visit to HQ. So I'm actually going to the States in a few weeks. and I'll be at the headquarters. The boss has promised a tour, which I really hope will pan out the way we all want it to pan out. I want to meet Ben Brown, the archivist, and see the Smackdown Fist. I'll also be able to work an entire week's worth of shows, including Backlash. So that's the week I'm going to be in Stamford. So I'm super excited for that, just to get to experience things differently. We've been employed like 4 years at this point, and I haven't set foot in HQ yet. So just to be able to get that experience is giving me, as LA Knight likes to say, a tingling in my loins.
So Mania is happening, and we all watched the Smackdown, the Go Home show coming into WrestleMania Saturday and Sunday, and I'm not gonna ask what the matches are, but for you guys leading up to those respective days, which storyline intrigues you and makes you be more involved as commentators?
I'm all in on the Fatal 4-Way for the Intercontinental Championship, especially after Braun Breaker brought out the math earlier. I was like,
Steiner math.
now I'm paying.
He sounds like Scott attention. Too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because what was it? 129.
125 point.
2%.
125 and 2/3 chance. I was like, close enough.
Something like that. When he brought it out, I was like, okay, I'm even more invested in this because, as I said before, me and Fan have both turned into the Dominic fanboys, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but I feel that this is Dom's moment. This is his time to shine. This is his opportunity to finally win a championship.
It's like his actual Mania moment. I think it's without his dad too, which is
where you stand.
For me, it's got to be LA Knight versus Jacob Fatu. I've become such a Jacob Fatu fan over his time in WWE. So I'm just excited for him to go nuts. I want to see him have what looks like a seizure when he finally wins that championship. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like that Jacob Fatu dance when he looks like he's having a seizure. It's so hilarious. It's my favorite thing. And I want to see the entire stadium just do that thing with Jacob Fatu. It would make me laugh so hard.
So that will replace yeeting?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Yes, please. Yes, please. The Jacob Fatu shake.
The Jacob Fatu. I saw him when I was in Reality Wrestling. We had a show there with him. And I was like, no way. This guy's going to be in WWE. Because it's like something above like WWE at the time when I saw Jake. I'm like, wow. If he lands in WWE, he's going to be mega over. Not knowing that was in 2023. 2 years. Like 2 years and change. And here he is main eventing WrestleMania. It's such a fast track to what he's doing, and especially what was it? I know someone who faced Penta a few months back, and I saw that match with him, and I was like, wow, this guy. I've never seen him apart from AEW. It's an independent wrestling show in Corpus Christi, which is like a 3-hour drive from where I'm at, and seeing what Penta does on the indies, I'm like, wow, if Penta being in that main event picture, I mean, one of the bigger card matches, sorry, let me just clarify that, like the bigger card matches, like it took a while for them to be there.
Yeah, I think there's like a sense of ownership that comes with having seen these guys on the come up, right? Like, you can say that I was there, or I was like part of the journey to some extent, or like that you saw them. And I think for me, as somebody who's been a part of the indie scene here in the Philippines, it's pretty cool to have those connections, right? So like, when, for example, when Dante Chen would have a match on NXT, I would always draw on the night that I got to hang out with him at a bar here in the Philippines, just getting to say I've had drinks with this man and, played music and watched him lose his mind after a wrestling show, so stuff like that, being able to draw on those experiences. There's a ton of news right now about a certain former Olympian who represented Guam, and if he ever makes it to WWE, I can say something like, I've actually driven this man around Metro Manila. He was actually riding shotgun in my car, and I just to be able to bring these things and make them part of WWE canon to such a very minute detail. That really excites me.
I was thinking about this too, where I want to see your thoughts on this too. And the elephant in the room, honestly, is Cena and in his farewell tour. And let's start at the beginning up until the point on WrestleMania Sunday. What's that journey like being as commentators along with Cena's journey?
I don't know if you expected it, Carlo. If you expected it to happen, there was a part of me that kind of was ready for it to happen, especially the moment before the moment. As Shea Serrano once said, the moment before the moment, you can kind of tell that it was happening, right? Like your wrestling brain is turned on, whether you like it or not. There's still a part of you that's, still being like this smart fan, right? And then it happened, and I just lost it to the point that I was kind of silent. And
Wow.
when Carla and I do our commentary for like these really big spots, really big moments, I've developed my go-to line, which is utang na loob, which directly translates to gratitude, which we explained earlier. But here in the Philippines, it can also be like a PG version of putang ina, which means motherfucker. So like when I yell utang na loob, it's like my broadcast friendly version of yelling putang ina. Right? And I didn't bust it out for the Cena heel turn, which is like a top 5 shocker moment in the history of wrestling. And I couldn't bust it out because I was so shocked by the entire thing. So those are the times where you wish you're like 100% on, but because you're just so lost in the moment, you just forget to do your job.
So you just basically blank out.
We don't get anything, right?
We know nothing.
We know absolutely nothing about what the plans were heading into that. All what I can share was that initially the segment was scheduled to be on the middle of the show. That is all we know, because before the show we'll get a rundown of the order of things, right? So at least we'll know what's coming next. Initially, it was in the middle, right after a women's match. We were supposed to see Cody inside the ring, and just Cody, and then it was scrapped at that point. It kept getting pushed back and kept getting pushed back until the very end. So me and Stan were kind of waiting for something big to happen, right? You know something was going to happen. You're not sure what it was going to be. Would it be a Cody heel turn? Would it be a Cena heel turn? You can choose between those options, but then when the moment slaps you in the face, then you'd have to react on the fly, because again, you could prepare a little bit of things that you could say if a heel turn happens, but again, if you prepare for every eventuality and every possibility, then it's too much work. Like you would drown in all of the options that are available to you, so you just have to quickly react on what is going to happen. But in terms of the entire build, I think we've seen just enough to still be super hungry when it comes to the time that they're matched up against each other. But what we saw earlier on Smackdown was already, I think, a glimpse of what WrestleMania would look like, because you saw some hardcore supporters of John Cena still booing Cody, right? You heard it. And John, to his credit, tried to spin it in such a way where he was asking Cody, are you really working so hard for these fans who are booing you right now? He kind of alluded to it, but I'm expecting a split really come WrestleMania, because a lot of fans are going there for John Cena, and heel or face, it really won't matter to them. They will support the guy that they've supported they've supported for the longest time.
Because I was thinking about this, and I want to see your take on it. Because you mentioned it, Carl, to let that polarizing event, is that polarizing effect of that. Do you guys think it's just the generations of fans who are Cody fans and who are Cena fans? Do you see the sway from either generations of the fans at the WWE universe?
I think we're at a point where you don't necessarily root for the guy that's from your generation or the guy who's being presented as the hero or the villain. It's really more of, that's my guy, and I'm going to root for my guy or my girl, right? So I think the best example of that is the triple threat for the Women's World Championship, where you have Io fans, Bianca fans, Rhea fans. And, if you're rooting for Io, for example, then you're probably going to be booing Bianca and Rhea if something happens to go their way. So it's really about you rooting for your bias in K-pop terms more than the other wrestlers who are involved.
How about you, Carl? Because I was thinking about actually that's actually a better approach on that. And I was thinking about even with Gunther and Jey Uso, that one you can't tell who's gonna go for who, because Gunther is one type of fan base, and then Jey Uso's kind of like it's the yeet versus it's that loud minority versus the silent majority of fans too. Like, do you think it's that my guy approach? Do you think that's been a trend even now, like leading up to this weekend?
Well, that's one part of it. The other part is we are also longtime wrestling fans who just are looking forward to more things, right? Because being a wrestling fan is continuous. It doesn't stop. Sometimes you get to imagine what the future will look like if this guy wins or if this guy wins, right? Okay, if Gunther wins, then I may be able to imagine him going up against CM Punk, him going up against any list of superstars that you'd want. On the other side, if Jey Uso wins, then I might get to see him going title versus title with Cody, having Sami Zayn as a challenger, and then you decide which set of possibilities you'd rather be a fan of, right? And then you choose. Then that's how you choose sometimes which guy you want to win, because paminsan, you don't really get to support either Gunther or Jay. Maybe you're neutral, both of them, but there is a result that you want to see happen, and that's what you end up supporting because that's the avenue that you want to chase.
Okay. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I did watch your WrestleMania predictions episode on the Wrestling podcast, and the one thing that stood out was everything. There is a speed where it started speeding up all the way to tonight at the time that I'm recording this, and it's just full speed ahead. Do you think with this WrestleMania, I think there wasn't really Cody and Cena, that's the main storyline, but with 41, do you think? I'm sure the quality will up itself up until tonight.
Yeah, I guess you could say that if you're going to compare it to 40, it's different in the sense that you didn't have that large looming shadow of the bloodline hanging over it, right? I think that's what makes 41 so different, because it's a bit of a departure from the past 4 WrestleManias. So in a way, I guess I understand more than most how jarring it can be. But I also think that it's kind of like the MCU, I would say, where we're in a new phase of storytelling, right? Like after Avengers Endgame, you could tell it was a new ball game. And when Cody beat Roman, it was literally an Avengers Endgame moment where the sins of Roman's past came back to haunt him. And now we're in phase 5 or phase 6 or whatever, where you're in the Cody Rhodes era. So I understand the sentiment that it's just a different feel. But you're right, Eman. It is full speed ahead, as we should be, because we just finished the go home week, and all that's left is to strap in for this crazy time that is essentially Christmas for all of us wrestling fans.
I think the better way of saying it, it's like whiplash. Like when Smackdown ended tonight, it was like a whiplash. Like, oh, WrestleMania's tomorrow. Like it's that type of like reaction, and it's just like all of the build up leading up to tomorrow. But I think it's just a matter of the execution with the speed.
Mm-hmm.
With
The speed of the build-up, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I get to understand why, because I think the only matchup that got a real build-up from Royal Rumble to now was Jay versus Gunther, because they decided on that quick, right? Because that was like 10 weeks of hell, as Gunther would say it. And
Yeah.
You got to take a full ride of emotions, the highs and lows of what they did with Jay and Gunther. And at the end of it, with the involvement of Jimmy, for example, you're totally invested because you appreciated the long runway of what they had between those two. Unfortunately, you can't give enough time or that kind of time to everything, right?
Hmm.
You will get it in some setups, you won't get it in others. That's just the reality of it. The other reality of it is that John Cena will not be available for a lot of these dates. That's just how it
Hmm.
is. Like he is a worldwide superstar. He is busy with his life outside of wrestling. So you cannot expect him to be with Cody in pushing for a story in this match. He tried. He showed up when it mattered. He showed up for a couple of exchanges, and it did make it more interesting. It did give us some moments where we enjoy the banter between the two. But again, that's just the reality of it. The name of John Cena up against Cody Rhodes does not need a lot of build up to be in the main event of
Right.
WrestleMania.
Yeah. Is one last thing, and this is your first time doing NXT for this year.
Mhm.
And it's developmental, but that's one thing. To move something from Raw and SmackDown and the PLEs to something that's new with NXT, like what was that like approaching Stand and Deliver coming in about 12 hours.
I can take this one because before in our first like 3 years of working with the WWE, I only watch highlights of NXT because
Okay.
I mean I feel like I'm giving myself an excuse here, but as someone who works full time in the PBA, we will have game days. Sometimes it's Tuesday to Sunday, right? And that's 2 games each, and I watch every game. So if you imagine that kind of TV time alongside the Raw and SmackDown that you'd have to
Mm-hmm.
watch, I don't really find enough time to watch NXT. But now that we are doing this full time, and now that we are commentating on NXT, I asked Stan to help me out a bit when it comes to getting to know the NXT superstars. I would need him to start tag team matches by naming some of the superstars because I may not be all too familiar with them. And he's helped me out so much. But now I have gotten to a point where I think I'm just as excited for any PLE as Stand and Deliver because that show is stacked. I mean, the show that they've put together, that triple threat main event and that 6-woman ladder match
Yep.
for the North American Championship, I think that may have the opportunity to steal the show, not just in Stand and Deliver, but for the entire weekend. It could be really, really good if you imagine the type of talent that they put together in that 6-woman ladder match.
I like to make the joke that the moment Carlo can successfully tell apart Kendall
Us.
Gray and Carly Bright and Brinley Reese, that's when I know I've done my job, you know. Which is not to disparage any of those three superstars. It's just that with all of the talent coming in through the Performance Center, WWE ID,
Yep.
NXT, all of that stuff, a lot of names can get lost in the shuffle for us, like in our mental Rolodexes, right? And Carlos, right. It does take a lot of bandwidth and time and mental energy to watch all of this wrestling and to know who's who, right? So it really is tough. It really is a challenge. And maybe I just have too much time on my hands. Maybe sometimes I just have too much bandwidth that, you know, I end up watching all of this wrestling that I get to tell all of these people apart, you know, but it does come in handy, you know, when people like Penta and Ray Fenix show up and they get to do their thing. I'm able to draw on 10 years of fandom of having watched these guys do their thing outside of WWE and then bring that to what we do on commentary. So I'm sure we've gone way off base from what you initially asked, right? But it really just goes back, for me at least, to the love of wrestling. And I think that's where I draw the excitement from doing something like Stand and Deliver, even if we're going to have to be doing sound check on a Saturday night here in the Philippines to go on air for Stand and Deliver at 1 a.m. and then take a quick nap and then do it all over again like 4 hours later for WrestleMania Saturday. It just really goes back to the love of professional wrestling and a slight worship of the almighty dollar.
Capitalism is at work.
Gotta-
So we'll end the conversation here. And for you guys, how excited are you for WrestleMania? Saturday and Sunday, we'll throw in Stand and Deliver in the mix. Hype us up because it's the weekend in professional wrestling this year. So give us something to be excited about.
I'm both excited and scared of of the schedule that is going to be. But again, as much as we can, it's all about for me and Stan. It's all about conserving when you can, but putting out what is needed to tell the correct story, right? To have the same energy that the US announcers and all of the other announcers that work on Netflix will have, because you have to put the proper respect on the superstars that are going to have their moment. I mean, a lot of these ladies and gentlemen have worked their whole lives for these moments, right? Especially for the ones who are debuting in WrestleMania or debuting for Stand and Deliver. They work so hard to be able to get there. And the worst thing is for us to mess up their moment, even if it's in our local language. So we'll have to be prepared. We'll have to be rested, and we'll have to have enough voice to do all these shows from today up until Wednesday here in Manila. We're not stopping. But again, we're just so excited to be part of this completely for the first time again. Because in the past, as Stan said, it was WrestleMania Saturday and Sunday, and then we're done. But now we can get to enjoy everything. We can get to enjoy the build up, the ride, the fallout from the Raw after WrestleMania. I cannot wait for Stand and Deliver at 1 a.m. here.
Couple of things for me. On a personal note, it's a huge week for my wife and me, because literally right after the NXT that caps off WrestleMania week, we fly off for our honeymoon. So I'm like Jacob Fatu here, all gas no brakes, right? And so like we're trying to pack, and we're figuring out our trip, and I'm preparing for WrestleMania week and all that stuff. And I'm also hoping that my next door neighbors are wrestling fans, because we're going to be up all night screaming at the top of our lungs. And if these people living beside me are not wrestling fans, then I will have really fucked up their weekend. So, I don't know what Carlo's situation is, if there are any houses right beside his, because there are two houses right beside mine. And, I'm kind of dreading it. So I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of lucky that I have this little booth. But this little booth will not be enough to contain the excitement when we yell utang na loob, or God forbid putang ina on a Netflix broadcast.
I have enough space, I think, between houses, and my wife is in BGC, so she will rest comfortably and quietly while I lose my mind in WrestleMania.
Oh my goodness. So I have nothing left to give. You have the floor. Where can we find you, Carlo? Where can we find you, Stan?
Oh, first off, Eman, thank you so much for having us. It's always so exciting, so interesting when we get to share our stories as the voice of the Philippines in the WWE. Social media, I'm just Carlo_Pamintuan. I don't know much else. I don't have a podcast like Stan has, but I want to drop by as much as I can, so you can follow the wrestling podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks for putting over the Wrestling Podcast, Carlo. Follow that show. It's at Wrestling Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, at Wrestling2XPod on TikTok, Twitter, and Blue Sky. For me personally, it's at _Stansy. That's spelled _STANSY. We love to talk wrestling outside of what we do with the WWE. So shoot us a message over there. Please be nice. In person, please follow Drew McIntyre's PSA. Wear deodorant. Take a shower. Don't call wrestlers by their government names, and don't be a creep. I don't think that's too much to ask.
Wow, kayfabe to end the podcast. And I'll make an effort to watch the streams for you guys on Thursdays, because it's almost when I wake up. So it's like, oh, cool, I can say hi. So you guys have been really killing it in the Philippines. And as a fellow kababayan, even though we're literally worlds apart, you guys have been really given a voice to the Filipino fan base in the in the WWE universe. I'll give you flowers for that and doing all these shows.
Thank you, man.
This is your first year doing full tilt SmackDown, Raw, PLE, NXT. So I want to give you your flowers on that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, the goal has always just been for it to be one of us, you know, so for it to be us and being on this platform, we just hope that the other wrestling fans here in the Philippines can say, those are our guys, they're one of us, instead of that envy mixed with resentment that it should have been me, or, you know, someone else could do it better. You know, that's the last reaction we want. So thank you for acknowledging us, no pun intended, and we just hope that we make the Filipino wrestling fans proud.
Do that. So we'll end our conversation. Before we ramble about the Bloodline 2.0, we'll end our episode. And for those who are listening to YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, thank you so much for tuning in. And we're on text.